Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick joining you to talk about the defense this week in that game against the Colts. Obviously, a very disappointing outcome, but here to talk about it with me, and a fine defensive effort, actually, is Melissa Kim of 105.7. And if you don't know by now, she hosts Game Day Flockdown, which is on Friday night, believe it or not, Game Day Flockdown, and the post-game show for the Ravens, also on 105.7, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
All right. Melissa, thanks for joining us tonight.
Oh my God, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate our conversations in camp. I know you're a big Jim Leonhard fan going back.
I am. Yeah. Jim Leonhard was a defensive coordinator when I was covering the Wisconsin Badgers. I mean, I could not say enough wonderful things about this man, just as a coach, as a personality, just as a human being. I don't know if anyone out there has seen the clip, but this man can still dunk a basketball against college guys. So, yeah.
And he's about 5'8", right?
Yeah, I mean, he's not the tallest guy in the world, but he has a big personality to make up for it. I can promise you that for sure. No, but when I was at Wisconsin, and obviously when he was here with the Ravens too, obviously very well liked by players and coaches alike. Just a wonderful, great guy. And now he's at Illinois. So, coaching against the Badgers. So that is an interesting situation. Coaching for Bielema there, obviously, who you might be a little bit familiar with from Bielema's past at Wisconsin as well. I've kind of been around everywhere. So, yeah.
So Jim Leonhard played at 5'8", 188, played only one season in Baltimore, that 2008 season, but he's probably best known for in the playoff run, not only having a great playoffs personally because he was outstanding, but he also took the green dot from Ray Lewis for those 3 games. And a lot of Ravens fans don't know that, but a little piece of Ravens lore there. He's really the only player to take it from him while he was on field between 1997 and 2012. So
that makes a lot of sense to me. Knowing him, that makes a lot of sense.
And certainly had a great postseason, particularly that game at Tennessee. He was really one of the stars defensively there. But about this game. So the Ravens coming off a 22-19 loss to the Colts. Obviously a great defensive effort wasted in this one. They held the Colts to 3.9 yards per play. You were there, obviously. What about the energy from the crowd in this one in particular? I thought it was very loud.
It was certainly very, very loud, especially when the Ravens were on defense. So the fact that those communication things that they've been working on, I think are so important. I've talked to a lot of guys about that, coming into this season during the offseason and preseason. And in particular, I remember talking to Patrick Queen at the stadium practice in a one-on-one, and he had told me that this is the best that this team has communicated since he's been here. So since 2020. So that to me signaled this is something might be different this year. And then after that, and talking to Marcus Williams and talking to Kyle Hamilton, I'd asked them specifically about the communication after hearing that. And they're like, oh, it's definitely on point. Kyle obviously coming off his rookie year has a little bit of might not have a better understanding of that. But Marcus, for sure, a veteran guy, he was like, no, the communication is excellent this year. And I think we saw that, especially for me, I saw that in the first game right away against the Texans, when you noticed, when they were lining up, that they were running back and forth and pointing to each other and, yelling things to each other. That was something that you saw last year a little bit, but it was like right before the other team would snap the ball. So you knew that they were trying to make adjustments, and it was a little they were a couple milliseconds behind, right? But then this year, you're really seeing that happen ahead of the snap. So I think that has made such a significant difference for this defense. They have guys that are talking a lot more. Obviously, Roquan Smith, a big part of that. But you're seeing that trickle-down effect, I think, in that defense as well, because you're seeing Patrick Queen emerge a lot more, and you're seeing, other guys as well.
Yeah, I saw Patrick Queen in the first game at home. He readjusted, patted some fannies to move linemen pre-snap once, and he repositioned a cornerback, that's really something when you see that kind of thing from an inside linebacker. That's an all-around look for the effort. People that don't realize, and you're making it good to highlight this, is that people don't realize how important it is and how difficult it is to communicate on defense at home, because home crowds are taught to be loudest and louder than loudest when the opposing team has the ball at key moments in the game. Try and disrupt the huddle to the degree you can. That's very important. Brian Billick was big on that. Cheer while they're in the huddle. By the time they're at the line of scrimmage, you've lost a lot of your ability to do it. But they still check at the line of scrimmage. And what we saw in this game was 3 separate false starts by the offensive line, and each of those stalled a drive. Technically, one of them was a 1-yard penalty near the goal line that ended up on that safety, but the other one was, the other 2 both stalled drives as well, and that was just a big part of the defensive effort in this game.
Yeah, I think so too. And those kinds of things, you don't really think about that. I think when you're watching the game as a fan, how much that plays into effect crowd noise, because I'm not sure it really comes through on TV for people
Mhm.
watching, but that really is such an important part of the game. And that is why, again, that fans matter. Those like every little aspect matters. That's why I love football so much because every little minute detail, it's so meticulous that it matters in obviously the outcome of a game sometimes.
Yeah, the Ravens had good new promos, or I don't know, whatever you call them, but videos on the board showing a flock of ravens tearing up a Colts flag during the game that I thought was kind of interesting. But I think that's the first they've done to try and increase the noise level at the stadium. It was a rainy day that not every seat was filled in this game, and it definitely was a case where I thought we got some additional reverb off of the seats, which probably transmit noise or reflect noise a little better than people.
Yeah, and they have like the decibel thing. I think they use sometimes to
Mhm.
kind of get the crowd involved. The video team, I think, always does just a great job of these like hype videos, like with the music and all the graphics and stuff like that. So yeah, I think that stuff was pretty cool, actually.
All right, so let's move on and talk a little bit about the one big mistake everybody's talking about, and we're going to be fairly brief with this, just because
Yeah.
it is what it is. I think it's been discussed, but I know you have participated in the interviews today, and you understand what's gone at the castle, and some of the finger pointing has apparently stopped. But their fair catch mistake, 2:03, they ruled the step out of the end zone occurred
Hmm.
instead of 2 minutes when it appeared the sack didn't seem significant at the time. It actually ended up being enormously significant. The Ravens lined up in a very clever formation, because it's not something you do very often, is
Hmm.
defend a free kick on a safety where you can't kick it off a tee. And they had this 7-2-1-1 formation to try and basically defend it. I've got some detail on that in my article if you want to take a look at it, folks. But I thought very well designed. But they apparently spent a lot of time on design on how to defend the potential for an onside punt effectively, without really talking about the possibility of additional time being put on the clock.
Yeah, there's a lot of confusion, I think, overall for everyone involved in this situation. And Coach Harbaugh, he did take responsibility for that because, at the time, when Gardner Minshew stepped out of the end zone, so they ruled it at 158, and then that obviously changes everything, literally between 203 and 158,
Mm-hmm.
obviously after the 2 minute warning. And so, yeah, I think that they thought that it was possibly going to be before that was always going to be an onside kick, pop up kick, something like that, any kind of thing. So, um, you know, I think communication ended up being, as we were talking about with the defense, communication in this situation was obviously really important. But yeah, they said that they couldn't get the word out to Zay Flowers before they wanted to. So yeah.
You could see Harbaugh on the sideline in a high angle shot, and he's very identifiable because he's got that light
Hmm.
gray shirt on, and maybe these even want it that way so people can see him. And he's pointing back in what looks like Flowers' direction. He puts up two fingers as he's pointing. I don't know whether he meant 2 minutes or
Hmm.
go to number two, which means you're returning this kick or whatever it might have been. And then he seemed to get some kind of response from him because he thumbs up to him back. So I don't know. He might have been Hamilton because he's also kind of on that same vector from where
Hmm.
Harbaugh was. But it really looked as if Harbaugh had the answer that he thought he was supposed to get from Flowers on that play. I'm big at looking at the emotions that are occurring on the sideline. He's
Oh
obviously
yeah.
very, very pissed off after the play.
Yes.
And let me give one other thing is that Phillips came back. He seemed to understand what was going on. He was one of the front seven. He walked back to have a teaching or accountability moment with Flowers after the play. There's no reason for him to talk to him on that play other than to say, you
Yeah.
weren't supposed to fair catch that ball.
Yeah. Yeah. I think everyone's kind of just looking at it now that it happened, made a mistake, learning from it, moving on. Because in that situation, I hate when those. It's like one of those things that it's out of your control at that point. You know what I mean? And in this sense, you could only control what you could in this game, which is what I guess what the moral of this game was: control what you can control, which some of which they did. Yeah,
That's good with the officiating problems too. That's certainly true.
yeah, yeah.
All right. Historic game from Kyle Hamilton, 3 sacks in the first half. The 3 sacks is the NFL record for a defensive back. He's the 11th player ever to do it. The second Raven, Benny Thompson, did it in 1996. Um, some detail on that again in my article. Only 22 snaps for Benny Thompson in that game against the Jacksonville
Wow.
Jaguars. It was at Jax in '96, but he was inserted as a quarterback not a quarterback, a space back, where he is the seventh defensive back in quarter packages. He actually replaced Ray Lewis that year for that role in particular. He was in there. He was sent in to spy Brunell on those plays, did it 3 times, and actually took him down once. We kind of forget that Brunell actually was known for mobility at one time. Towards the later part of his career at Washington and whatnot, he didn't have that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, listen, for Kyle Hamilton, I think it's unfortunate that they lost the game, because I think that they could have celebrated this a little bit more, a little bit of a damper on the day. Obviously, I think he would have been maybe a little bit more excited about it after the game too. But in terms of what makes him so great, I mean, you look at last season, right, when he first came to the Ravens. So obviously, you're looking at his size. I mean, he's like a 6'4" safety. I mean, that's literally unheard of. Super tall, super long. I think one of the coaches in the beginning said that he had like go-go gadget arms or something like that, but also very quick. You see the difference, I think, in terms of year 1 and year 2. And I think like the trajectory is so steep in that sense, because you see the things that his mistakes that he made at the beginning of the season. And then what I love about him is he was so mature, and he came here when he was 20 years old, and he owned up to those mistakes up front, in front of the camera, in front of the media. And then he progressively learned from it. I think you saw that progression, obviously, towards the end of last year, and then talking to him during training camp a bunch, and, during the preseason games, he said that, yeah, he feels a lot more comfortable in year 2. And I think we're seeing the results of that right away. And I like that he's so versatile too. You know what I mean? Like, they're obviously, as we saw against the Colts, moving him around, traditionally in, some safety, some slot, he's just moving around quite a bit. And I think that his speed obviously has a lot to do with that. And I think yesterday as well, the personnel situation, obviously, that they were thrown into injury wise, that has obviously, made a difference in what they've been able to do with him as well. So maybe a little bit of a good thing.
I think it's actually very much of a good thing. I've been a big proponent this offseason that they did have to make a decision about Hamilton to play him at slot or strong safety. And the defense should be built around wherever Hamilton is going to play. Meaning if he's the right guy for slot corner, meaning that's where he's going to be the greatest player they can be, then you put him there. If he's going to be the right guy for strong safety, again, meaning that's where he can become a superstar, then you do there. We've seen the first 3 weeks of the season now, the Ravens have played a lot of cover 2. Now, what that means is 2 safeties back, and that kind of forces a lot of the passing game underneath, which actually removes Hamilton from a lot of the play. And we saw that particularly against the Bengals. He did have a big tackle on 3rd down to stop somebody short of the sticks.
Yep, because when everyone else was blitzing, I remember that one. Yeah, specifically.
Yep, exactly. It was on 3rd and 11. It was a 6-yard play when it was a big play in the game. But then most of the rest of the game, he was kind of out of sight, out of mind, which was good because all the passes were going short and the Bengals weren't doing very much on those. But you see just how much impact he can just take over a game defensively when he's up closer to the line of scrimmage. And does he have the perfect set of traits for nickel? Not really, but he's outstanding.
Oh yeah, definitely. And what I think too is that he talked about after the game on yesterday, Sunday, seems like a long time ago now. He was saying that he had Jadeveon Clowney, really kind of coaching him through a lot of this stuff, which is kind of on the pass rush, which is kind of like neat to see that you're seeing kind of the integration of all those positions on the defense communicating with each other. I think Clowney spoke about him after the game too, calling him he calls him like the avatar or something like that. He's a 6'4" safety, he can run, he can hit.
Long arms, probably, right? That's what he's referring to.
The go-go gadget arms, the very long arms. I think it has to do also because his dad was a basketball player, as we all know, professional basketball player in Europe growing up. So he definitely has the genetics working for him there. But I think that they've been coaching him up a little bit too, to do some different things. And I felt that it's kind of neat to see all that, like those relationships develop when you see these veteran guys like Jadeveon Clowney, talking up Kyle Hamilton and trying to improve his skill set. It was pretty neat.
Yeah, obviously, it's best when Kyle Hamilton can get a free run at the quarterback, as he did 3 times in this game with no obstruction. But there are other times when he actually has to use his hands to get to the quarterback, and he's shown some wonderful moves last year, in particular doing that. And I would think if he's open to it, Clowney would be a great guy to teach him some good hand play there and get violent. Really been excited, by the way, about Clowney's play early this year.
Yeah, no, same. I think that he kind of quietly came in and, not quietly, but he's quietly kind of slowly made his impact here, obviously with the injury situations with both Odafe Owe and now David Ojabo as well. I think that his veteran presence and his experience is obviously going to be highly utilized. And I think we're seeing there's so many intangibles, right, with this team that I like really love to see in terms of veteran guys that are really making an impact on these younger guys. On the other side of the ball, specifically with Zay Flowers, I know OBJ and Nelson Aguilar in particular have been really, mentoring him. Like I see Nelson and Zay out to dinner all the time, and obviously bonding and talking. And OBJ and Zay Flowers' lockers are next to each other too. So I really do love that about this team. All the relationships that are built in terms of the older guys and the veteran guys sharing their knowledge and experience with the younger guys.
That is really always good to see. Whenever I saw Pernell McPhee try to teach younger players, or last year it was Justin Houston teaching some of the guys at Bastrop.
Yeah.
All right, so outstanding day for Hamilton, and we'll probably talk about him some more, and we're going to get into individual players in part 2 of this. But some interesting things happening on defense. Rock Ya-Sin and Darby are still splitting time at left corner. And Brandon Stevens, the child nobody wanted. First, he gets kicked out of the safety room because they needed him at slot corner, and then they needed him more at outside corner. And frankly, I thought that's where he should have started from the beginning. But he's back there now, and he's the team's number one cornerback right now.
Yeah, one thing that I love about him is he's kind of like the Patrick McCary of the secondary, right? He can play like all 5 positions in the secondary. And I remember talking to him before. I like literally, I think I talked too much. I talked to everybody, like generally in the preseason, off season, quite a bit, in the locker room. And one of the things he said was that he does feel a little bit more comfortable at safety, but in terms of outside corner, he's been progressing every day. This is during camp, obviously. But he did say that he's obviously open being versatile, and he actually played running back in college too. So he said because of that, that's why he has so much knowledge of learning concepts of run schemes and pass concepts and literally everything that he's now able to do in the secondary. So shout out to his college coach and high school coach for making him the way that he is. But the one thing that I thought was interesting that he told me in terms of the motto of the defense at that point was that he says that they all work on a string. That's their motto. Everybody operates on a string. So that means the more that you can do, the more valuable that you are to a team. So he tries to just study everything in that sense.
Oh, that's good. Now I like hearing that. I've never heard that before too. That's very good. What he's done this year is really impressive. He's been much better than the Ravens could have hoped for. And frankly, the cornerback position, which came into the season, is by far the weakest, has been not at all that on the defense. They've been quite solid in terms of the 3 guys they've had there at outside corner. And now I thought Ardarius Washington played well while he was at slot, and now Hamilton is there. Corner ain't the problem right now.
Yeah, that was honestly when I was coming into the season, everyone was like, what's your, if there's one position that you're worried about? And I said outside corner, but obviously Brandon Stevens is handling it. And also with Rock Ya-Sin and Ronald Darby, obviously they're both a little bit newer to the team. Darby obviously has, they both have veteran experience, but Brock also injured for a little bit of time as well during preseason, so he didn't really get those reps in. But that would be like my guess as to why they're splitting time in those 2 positions right at left corner right now, because just because of the reps that they haven't been able to get with the team. So
yeah, I'm perfectly okay with that, and it's been good generally speaking when the Ravens have rotated corners, because you'll find yourself needing to go down to 2 at some point just due to injury purposes. What's been remarkable to me is that Stevens has been an every down player the whole season, while these guys are splitting time. But it's a very good 2024 move, because they're going to need Stevens will be here next year, and those 2 guys probably won't be. And is Yasin signed for 2 years? I actually don't know if he's signed for 1 or 2. I'll look it up while we're going through the next segment. Well, we had some more bad IR news today. Yes. Not IR news, I'm sorry. We did have bad IR news because Wallace got moved to IR. But we had some other bad injury news in terms of what I let you talk about it, because I know you're closer to this than me.
Oh, no, Tylan Wallace on IR now with a hamstring injury. We saw David Ojabo come out of the game with an ankle injury again against the Colts. Geno Stone, too, going down with a rib injury, and those injuries are TBD. Monday is usually kind of their evaluation day where they evaluate guys in terms of how serious their injuries are. Gus Edwards, we had heard yesterday that he was being evaluated for concussion, but today Coach Harbaugh did not specify on that concussion specifically, but just that he was being evaluated. So you hope that means in coach lingo that it is not a concussion, that he's doing a little bit better than that. But in terms of, injury moves, Marlon Humphrey was not placed on IR at the beginning of the season. So you're hoping that he'll be back at practice at some point this week. Hopefully on Wednesday, we'll see about that. And Marcus Williams actually posted on Instagram, on his Instagram story today, a picture of himself and says, "Take a deep breath. Your time is coming." So read into that how you will. With how guys are using social media these days, be a little bit cryptic sometimes, throw out some little hints. And he was also Coach Harbaugh also asked about Tyus Bowser and Keaton Mitchell today, and he said that they kind of know where they are right now, but he'll share more about them next week. So you got to feel good about that because Tyus Bowser, you've seen him still, regardless of being injured or not, he's still out doing his pregame routine with fans and throwing the ball to fans in the stands. So, if he can do that, you're hoping that he can do quite a few other things too. But I mean, yeah, you look at the injuries on this team this season, and I have some 2021 vibes about it, which hopefully are not
Right.
the case at all. But I mean, we're still waiting to hear a definitive thing about our Darius Washington and his chest injury. But the fact that Coach Harbaugh even alluded to the fact that it could be season ending makes me not feel good about that.
Do you get the sense that might be a pec injury? If it's a chest injury, I mean, I don't know what else it can
yeah,
be.
chest muscle, he said. So I'm not really specifically sure
Pec.
what that is, but yeah, pec. So yeah. And then you're looking at some other guys that have been out for a little bit, Pepe Williams, Odafe Owe, who I saw all last week in a walking boot in the locker room. So, ankle injury there. And then the O line, Tyler Linderbaum, Ronnie Stanley, the ankle injuries. And Rashad Bateman said yesterday after the game, actually, he came up for a little bit. He said his hamstring just tightened up a little bit, so he should be okay, is what I'm guessing. And then the running back room, the poor cursed running back room. I mean, obviously, J.K. Dobbins not coming back at all. Justice Hill, turf toe is like one of those things that I've seen guys have, and some of them it lasts like 2 weeks and they're good, but some of them it lingers for a while, for like months. So you just never know. I feel like with that.
We've been through a long turf toe times with Jonathan Ogden here in Baltimore. It's
Mm-hmm.
probably the most famous case of turf toe, and that really sucked. Is all I can say.
Yeah,
That was awful.
yeah,
So lots of moves to be made probably this week. They didn't even wait with Wallace. The other ones, I guess, they're looking at, but they're going to have to be some moves made because every single inactive spot is a walking wounded, and they had actually release Johnson to make room for
right.
Gordon to make they're both. I think the running backs were both practice squad elevations, and it was actually
Yeah.
Moon who was elevated the 53, right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. Because both Kenyon Drake and Melvin Gordon were practice squad originally. So yeah, I mean, you just want everyone to every week you just want everyone to stay healthy, obviously. But I mean, Coach Harbaugh asked today also about um, does this worry you? I mean, why are these injuries happening? And, part of it, he said it's just football. And the thing is that the Ravens are not the anomaly to this situation. You look around the league right now, there have been so many season ending injuries this year. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers, Nick Chubb, those are the big ones that come to mind for me. But yeah, in terms of this team's situation, Patrick Queen actually said this after the game yesterday. And he said, you know what, like in terms of depth on this team, we're all practicing, we're all taking reps. So like there really is no excuse for the next man up mentality if you can't perform, you know what I mean, when it comes to game time. So that's how they're looking at it, I think, in terms of the injury situation right now. But I think, yeah, there'll be some moves made before Sunday's game in Cleveland.
Right. I would agree on that. Let's actually get to talk about the defense a little bit on this. The Ravens did, I thought, a pretty good job stopping the run in this one. It wasn't a perfect thing. They allowed almost 4.0 yards per carry, and they allowed that left edge to crumble a couple of times, which led to 2 long runs. The rest of the game, they honestly was very minimal in terms of run impact.
Yeah, and I think that that was something that was to be expected. That was a battle that I was looking at actually coming into this game, like the Ravens offensive line versus the Colts defensive line, and vice versa, right? Because you look at the number of injuries that they had on the Colts offensive line as well. Obviously, Ryan Kelly being the big one, the veteran center, they're out with a concussion, and I thought that Justin Madubuike, Michael Pierce, those guys up front in the center, I thought that they handled it pretty well. And obviously we saw the results of some of that on those Kyle Hamilton sacks. But yeah, and in terms of there weren't, I don't think, a ton of long pass plays. Obviously the touchdown comes into mind, the Zach Moss touchdown where Patrick Queen was covering him, and there was literally nothing that he could have done differently. I think in that situation, he had mentioned after the game that he thought might have turned his head a little bit too soon. But I mean, you did see a little push too from
Yep.
Zach Moss off of it as well. So I think that certain things, there's nothing you can do in those situations. It's just a really good play, really good throw. So outside of that, I think so too.
It was a good throw. I will say Queen towers over him, so finding the football in the air is important for the contested catch, and that's one I'm going to put some blame on Patrick Queen. It just is. It's the way I am, and when I get pushed off like that. The Ravens got outsnapped 84-72 in this game. It was a variety of problems, but two things primarily, and both offensive. They turned the ball over, obviously, way too much, but also they didn't have the kind of series success rate that they'd had the first 2 weeks of the season. So series success rate is percentage of times that you get a first down or touchdown over percentage of first downs that you have. And it was 79% for the first 2 weeks. It was only 67% in the third week, so down substantially. It doesn't seem like that would be the difference, but that's the difference between the best team in the league at 79% and probably somebody's ranked in the 20s, in the league in this week. And they did not, they obviously did not move the ball efficiently. It was a herky jerky offense, and there were a lot of ill-timed, incomplete passes during this one. The defense having to play 84 snaps. This is a general fear of the Monken offense, is that there may be more ups and downs than they're worth Roman, where Roman knew how to get a game over quickly. And frankly, the Ravens had much better series success rate with him.
Yeah, and that's the thing to the snap count, right? Did you hear about this afterwards? Someone had asked today that Daryl Worley played 102 snaps because he played special teams and defense. Isn't that insane?
Oh, really? Huh.
Yeah. So, so he was asked about Coach Hart was actually asked about that because I hadn't seen the snap count yet before today, but 102, which obviously is like a lot. And, Coach Harbaugh said that that's never what you want, quite literally. But he said that you don't really plan on playing like 88 snaps on defense. That's a challenge. He said it's a challenge of where they're at right now, obviously, but they just kind of had to deal with the personnel issues that they did have. But Daryl Worley deserves like 24 hours of an ice bath after that. That sounds intense.
He did a wonderful job playing the back end because somebody had to play for him.
With the busy fall season already in swing, you might be looking for wholesome, convenient meals for jam-packed days. Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit, can help you with fast, chef-prepared, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. You'll save time, eat well, and stay on track with your healthy lifestyle. If you're too busy this fall to cook but want to make sure you're eating well, then get Factor. This is what I did. We were moving, packed up all my dishes, everything needed better meals. I signed up for Factor. It's best meals, probably the healthiest I've eaten in a month thanks to these Factor meals. Because with Factor, you can skip those extra trips to the grocery store and the chopping, the prepping, the cleanup, all while still getting flavor and the nutritional quality you need. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are ready in just 2 minutes, so all you have to do is heat, enjoy, and then get back to crushing your goals, which for me was trying to move. But now I can't. I need them for work at lunch every day. They're perfect. So this September, get Factor and enjoy eating well without the hassle. Simply choose your meals and enjoy fresh, flavor-packed meals delivered to your door. Ready in just 2 minutes. No prep, no mess. So head to factormeals.com/Ravens50 and use that code Ravens50 like I did to get 50% off. That's Ravens50 at factormeals.com/Ravens50 to get 50% off your Factor meals.
Aaron Rodgers' season is officially over, but yours has just begun at MyBookie. NFL, college ball, and the brand new cash-out system gives you options to bet and win all season long. First 2 legs of your parlay hit? Cash out early and place another bet, or let it ride for a chance at a bigger payday. Join us at MyBookie for an entire season filled with daily odd boosts, same-game parlays, and huge prize pool contests. Right now, MyBookie has a no-strings-attached cash bonus that lets you deposit and withdraw quick. Use the promo code RAVENS on your first deposit of $50 or more, and you can receive up to $200 in cash instantly credited to your MyBookie account. That's promo code RAVENS to claim your cash bonus now. You can bet anything, anytime, anywhere, only with MyBookie.
Back there at strong safety and keep the ball funneled toward the front. And Worley, by being basically invisible, making all the tackles he needed to do, not having a bad day in coverage at all, was actually, I thought, had a really terrific game. And I'm looking at the 76 and 26 in terms of snaps offensively and defensively. Sorry, defense and special teams.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, credit to him because, like you said, basically remained invisible. That's how you know he was doing his job well. So yeah, whew. But yeah, props to him on that.
Yeah. Do you have any other individual points on the game, or maybe scheme points? Because this is where you usually talk about it. I just want to give you a chance before we move on and talk a little bit about packages.
No, I mean, I thought in terms of, honestly, no, I thought that everything they did was pretty legit, did pretty well on defense. That's kind of why I like doing defense more because I'm just on, especially with this team, because you're like, okay, usually you know what to expect, I think. But one thing too that a couple of the guys have talked to me about is that in terms of Mike McDonald's defense, I think Kyle Hamilton mentioned this to me last week. He said it's like complicated, but it's not. But like once you know what you're doing, it's really easy. The disguising, right? Because that's like what I think Mike
Mm-hmm.
McDonald did pretty well in terms of calling this game is disguising of the defenses, which is obviously how we saw the results of a lot of what we saw. But yeah,
Yeah, tremendous pass rush game, and that definitely
yeah,
has a lot of deception to it. I want to get into that in some detail in just about
yeah.
5 minutes here, maybe 10. But the packages I want to talk a little bit about first, and an interesting set because they did a couple things that were unusual from a package standpoint, and one of them was that they turned to a package with only one outside linebacker for 7 plays. And so I call it uncovered nickel because they use 3 down linemen and they're effectively using either Brent Urban, sorry, or Broderick Washington as a 5 tech to play on the outside of the formation. And unfortunately, one of the plays, Broderick Washington lost the edge on one of the runs. It was either the 26 or the 24. I think it was later in the game, so it was a 26. The first one, the 24-yard loss, was a Jabo losing it. So it's not like an outside linebacker can't lose it too. But they were so short on outside linebackers in this game. They had, only 3 guys by the end of the game, playing 84 snaps. That's a lot more snaps than outside linebackers and defensive linemen typically play. Now, corners, they play every snap anyway. Inside linebackers play every snap, although they get tired too. But defensive lineman, outside linebacker, because pass rushing is just so tiring, you really need to rotate them. It's always been the Ravens' philosophy. And this game, they just really overworked those guys.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of why, I mean, they almost didn't have a choice, you know what I mean? And like just using those packages that just have one outside linebacker because, again, of the personnel situation, which I think dictated a lot of what they were forced to do in this game across the board because of all the injuries, because of the, I don't want to say depth issues, but yeah, just because of all the
Depth
injuries
issues.
they had. I mean, yeah, I mean, they kind of had to just make the best of what they had, you know what I mean? Make do with what they had. So I think that given the situation that they were put into, I think that, everything generally worked. I mean, you can't be unhappy, I think, with how the defense played given the situations that they were put in.
No, the defense, nothing is on the defense about losing this football game. They played great, honestly. And the base nickel, and you rarely see results this good, but this is 54 of the team's 84 snaps. And they only gave up, 54 of 84. They gave up 186 yards, 3.4 yards per play in that nickel defense. And that's with Hamilton up front. That's a very versatile defense right now. And why is that? Because Hamilton is really a player who is equivalently good at being a big nickel as he is at being a coverage guy and a normal nickel in what you expect of him. Now, they have occasionally attempted to sub out for him, not in this game, but in last year towards the end, move him to strong safety or just allow somebody else to come in like Pepe to play slot corner on certain third and long type situations. They didn't do that any yesterday. Hamilton's obviously the best player on the field for the Ravens, but he was in there for every play. And I think it gives them a wonderful defense they can play against either 11 or 12 personnel. So if you decide to go a little heavier with a tight end, well, no problem. It's a nickel, but he's an extra big body in there and can handle the toughness and match up well against a tight end in the slot. And he does just fine against receivers there too.
Yeah, what I was so impressed with him is just how, I like did watch a little. The only film I got to watch so far this week was literally those 3 sacks, right? Mm-hmm. And how he just went through untouched, you know what I mean? Because of how I think on like the first sack and the third sack, it was Michael Pierce and Justin Madubuike that kind of like dropped back, and then like on one of them, they had Patrick Queen coming out from the left side, from the left side, and I mean, that's how, they were thinking about covering Patrick Queen, or where to put Patrick Queen. And then Kyle just kind of like went through unscathed. You know what I mean? He literally went through untouched on the first sack, and like the third one, I believe, is the one where he forced the fumble. So, I mean, obviously, as you said, best player on the field in that sense, for sure. He, like, the combination of him, right? The speed, the height, the vision.
Yeah, everything. He gives you instincts. I mean, he gives you a lot of value there. And the height is underrated. With those arm lengths, he's a looming presence to get the ball past if you're a quarterback. And we saw that in play with the pass defense. That was a remarkable play, diving in. Basically, he was rushing the quarterback, and he had to redirect himself, reach way out wide, and knock that ball down. But I want to get back to your point about the pass, about the 3 sacks. On each of those plays, the Ravens had simulated pressure. So in the first one, they dropped Pearson Matabike from the line, and he rushed off the edge. The tackle on that side was still engaged, I believe, by Clowney on that play, which meant there was no one to take care of Hamilton, and he got through cleanly. The second one, Clowney and Ajabo both dropped. That was Ajabo's last snap, in fact, in the game, was on the second sack. And he blitzed in. And they also had a blitz from Queen, which helped pick up traffic in the middle that I like, and a stunt also in that. You rarely see that, by the way. Yeah. 3 elements of deception all in the same play. And then I'll get the last one here. The sack minus 16, where he had the forced fumble, was a 4-3 pass rush, meaning 3 guys dropped off the line of scrimmage. And it was both, again, Pearson Matabike, as you said, so first and third sack, and also Patrick Queen dropped from the line of scrimmage. So I think that gave the Colts fits in this game, was them trying to figure out the assignments for blocking when the Ravens were showing people at the line of scrimmage and dropping them. And it kind of reminds me of the game the Ravens played at Miami a couple of years ago when they got beat very badly with a lot of cover 0 looks.
Yeah, that's kind of when I think we saw that was like the year of the cover 0, right? Like everyone's talking about cover 0, but yeah, what you were mentioning too, like the deception that's involved with this defense, I think is so good. I think that's one thing that they've done like pretty well, I think, under Mike McDonald, and obviously thriving on that, because you saw kind of Gardner Minshew too, trying to figure out what was happening as it was happening. That's what you don't want, obviously, if you're Gardner Minshew. And by the time he realized, like, oh, the guy, like, it was like behind on the third sack, was like behind Queen and Brandon Stevens, before that guy could even get open. I can't remember who the receiver was. Kyle Hamilton was already there, right in front of Gardner Minshew's face. So that the confusion, deception thing of dropping those guys back, especially like you said, like we were talking about with Justin Matabike and Michael Pierce, I thought that was like on point.
All right, outstanding. So package-wise, the Ravens didn't go to their base defense much, just 8 plays in this game. And when that happened, Kyle dropped back to play strong safety, and Worley was out. But otherwise, they were in just these very normal packages. They one rush nickel. We don't need to talk about that. It was only 1 play, 1 dime at the end of the regulation on that one play where Minshew grounded the ball where the screen didn't show up. By the way, what the hell are they trying to do there?
Listen, desperation measure, I think. But so I feel like we obviously, like, cover 2, if I can ask a question now too, like cover 2 is kind of, the staple of a lot of what we've been seeing. I was watching the Monday Night Football game a little bit tonight too, the Bengals Chargers one, and they were talking about, and we were noticing a little bit too, they're playing a little bit more like cover 4, a little bit, I mean, that people are kind of straying away from that a little bit. Teams are straying away from that a little bit, and a lot of people obviously, the blitz has become such a staple now as well. I mean, are we just kind of in a mission? Are we in an evolution time right now of defenses in terms of coverage?
I've kind of got my theories about this. The Ravens have played 3 guys right now, quarterbacks who aren't very impressive. So Stroud in his very first game, and didn't know what to expect. He hasn't been terrible by any stretch. He didn't turn the ball over against the Ravens by interception. But then they played the injured Joe Burrow, and that presents a great opportunity for cover 2 because and Stone's interception actually fell right in this category. Burrow does not have elite arm strength to start with. And now he has this calf injury where he can't really step through his throws. At least that's my theory going into this. You throw with your legs a lot. There's a lot of energy that comes from your legs when you throw. And so, he lofted up, basically was an artillery shell in the middle of the field, which was probably well enough placed where it would dart to hit Higgins. But there was way too much time for Stone to close the window from the front side of that play. And that's the way you get yourself in trouble. And Burrow knows his own limitations. And that's why these last 4 games now against the Ravens, there've been a lot of underneath throws as the Ravens say, look, we dare you to try to beat us deep. We're going to play cover 2, and you beat us short, but you're not going to beat us deep.
Yeah, it's been. I think that's like the thing that I like about defense a lot too, is that you see like the base similar concepts of things, and then you kind of see the evolution of it. But yeah, interesting to see.
Yeah, cover 2 became real popular. A lot of people call it Tampa 2. It existed before then, but a lot of people, think it sprung to life with the 2002 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But it's been around for a long time. The notion of it. When I grew up in the 1970s, I had a football game, Pay Dirt, which was Sports Illustrated football at the time. But I'll tell you that defense A was a 4-4-3 was the standard. So the standard was only having 3 defensive backs on the field. I'm like, okay, that obviously has passed us by.
Yeah.
So,
by quite a bit. Yes.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
All right. So let's move on and talk a little bit about the pass rush here, because I think we hit on a couple things, but there's more that we need to do. Some of it is a combination in this game of numbers and deception that McDonald used to get home. He wasn't afraid to send numbers, but he didn't do it too terribly much. So 13 of, that's interesting. I have 48 pass plays there and 49 here. Anyway, 13 out of 49, he 27% he blitzed, which is not a particularly high number. The Ravens are often in the 30s in that category. But they were, that's because I'm looking at the wrong game. That's how this kind of thing can happen. So they had a spike in that game against Stroud. So here we go. Okay. So when they rushed 24 times for 58 yards, 2.4 yards per play, you're going to see the trend here in a second. When they rushed 15 plays for 65 yards, 4.3. And when they rushed 10 plays for 67 yards, 6.7. So they're kind of actually doing Minshew a little favor once he figured out how to get rid of the ball quickly by rushing more.
Yeah, that's interesting to see. I'm like looking at the numbers myself now too, because I'm a visual learner. But yeah, I think that is interesting. That the fact that with the fewer number of pass rushers that hold on a second.
So the fewer pass rushers, you have less people in coverage, and if he can get the ball out quickly to the hot read, then he's going to be more effective at it.
Huh? Would you say that is typical?
No, I wouldn't say it normally goes either direction.
Right.
If it's Patrick Mahomes, he kills you on these when you rush more and they don't even try it. If it's Joe Burrow, he might, and because he gets the ball out very quickly normally, so you don't generally even try it against him. A lot of young quarterbacks, the more you rush, the more they're going to end up on the ground, and generally it's numbers will confuse them, and it's worth it.
Which is kind of surprising, given that the general trend, I feel like maybe, is that the younger quarterbacks are a little bit more mobile, right? When you see it, I don't know. I think that's a little bit surprising. But yeah, okay.
All right. One thing I count is ample time and space. There's a number of times he had a 3-second pocket. There's only 10 out of 49 dropbacks, so Ravens doing a good job pressuring him. 20% ample time and space only. On those 10, he was 6 of 10 for 91 yards. So they gave him good opportunities in that, and he threw for 9.1 yards per play. The ball out quick happened 20 times, and those are before pressure could develop. The ball is out, but it wouldn't have necessarily held up for 3 seconds. That was 41% of the passes, 4.6 yards per pass play. Generally speaking, that's fine, by the way. If you want to give up 4.6 yards per pass play, you can give it up pretty much all day, and you'll be happy with that defensively. But here's the big one. The Ravens generated pressure 19 times. It's not a tremendously high number, 39%. It's been over 50 before, but it can be in the teens occasionally. 5 sacks in there. Unfortunately, no turnovers. But with pressure, Minshew was 6 of 14 for 6 net yards on those 19 plays. So everything worked out to 0.3 yards per play. So the Ravens certainly had their way with him there, and the big missing element is not having a turnover.
In terms of what you think, you've said that the number was like lower than it normally is, usually over 50%. What particular in this game do you think worked for them, though, despite not having turnovers?
Getting the ball out quickly, or when they had ample time and space was better, but they only threw for 3.9 yards per pass. So it's hard for me to really pick out any subset that's particularly good. What I will say is that it was unfortunate. The Ravens seemed to get a little tired as the game went on, and in overtime, and in the last drive of Q4, when they kicked the field goal to tie, they had a couple of 12-yard throws. They had a 34-yard throw in overtime. So they actually were doing a pretty good job of making some plays late in this game. I thought the throw to Pittman, honestly, I thought it was pretty well defended, the 34-yard throw in overtime. And they did get out of it, fortunately. They got a 4th and 1 stop on that drive. But nice hit by Stevens and Stone, right? Stevens and Stone?
Yeah, Stone, yeah. And Brandon was the one that kind of like put his arm in a little bit, yeah. And then was able to kind of stop that play from happening. And again, development of Brandon Stevens still, I think, I think he got a lot of, we'll say, constructive criticism, we'll call it, the last couple of seasons in terms of what he was doing. But I think he's really started to come into his own in that sense too. And the confidence, you can see the confidence for him building even just in his demeanor and all of that in the locker room as well. That's like one of those plays too, though. Like obviously that catch,
Tip your hat.
Kind of like it's kind of like the Patrick Queen had the touchdown to Zach Moss when the Patrick Queen was covering. I mean, sometimes those things just happen, and it was just a better throw, a better catch, and they made the most of their opportunity in that sense. The Colts did. So as much as I do not want to admit that, but yeah,
right. He gave up a 23-yard play early in the game. I honestly felt the same thing. He was right there, had his hand up. Ball got through. I think it was Pierce that time who made the catch, and for 19 plus 4 roughly in terms of the yak. There's almost no defense for the perfectly thrown football, and there wasn't in that particular case. And the other times where he had a chance to make a play either after it or before, Stevens was quite good at doing it in this game, and I think overall he played very well.
Yeah, no, agreed. I mean, I think he was one of the leaders with tackles. I think he was like 3rd on the team in terms of tackles and all that too. So yeah, he was 3rd. Yeah, no, 2nd, I guess, if you're counting the Queen and Smith both had 12. But yeah, I thought he was all over the field. Honestly, I thought he balled out in this past game. So
yep, I agree on that. Let's talk a little bit about deception, if we can, on this. So there's 3 major elements of deception that I count. The first is off-ball blitzes, and there were 27 of those in this game. 0.55 per pass play. That is a lot. That is an awful lot. That's like a Wink Martindale or Rex Ryan number for a game. But they had good reason that they did it, that they really wanted to confuse the line assignments. And the guy you're really trying to confuse often the most is the center. And not necessarily because he makes the call, but because he's often the guy who has to pick somebody up the middle. It can also be a communication thing that he has to tell somebody to pick somebody up, or he's involved in a handoff in some way or another. So I thought what they did with the blitzes was outstanding. And it wasn't always the blitzer himself that got home, although it was Hamilton 3 times. It was other players that opportunity was created for other than the blitz. So Hamilton had 6 total blitzes in this game, and he had a pressure, a batted ball at the line of scrimmage. It might have been 2 pressures, a batted ball at the line of scrimmage, and 3 sacks. So it doesn't get much better than that in terms of a day of pass rushing as a defensive back.
No, it definitely, again, especially for a DB. I don't think that you often hear about that. You hear about that from maybe some linebackers, but definitely not a DB. But and again, as we've been talking about for the last couple minutes, utilizing him to the fullest of his ability. Obviously, the fact that he can be as versatile as he is, I think, is so important for this defense. And again, he's talked about them in the past too. He said that I will literally play wherever they want me to play. Mm-hmm. So we love to see that.
That first of all, great attitude, but second of all, great players, you can do that too and not degrade their performance. And Kyle Hamilton is clearly a great player at this point. Marshall Yanda, no problem. You can move him wherever you want. And he's going to be great playing whatever offensive line position you ask him to. Michael Orr, not so much. He's more on the margin as a player, despite being a first-round pick. He just wasn't as good. Adelis Thomas, you're fine. Kamalai Correa, you're not fine because he's not at that same level of play. So Hamilton is a guy that they can move around. And I honestly think the guy that they really need to set his position, even though he provides some versatility, I think it would be well suit him to keep him where he is Brandon Stevens. I don't really want to see him moved more. I think he's He's kind of a guy who's going to struggle at the NFL level playing defensive back just about anywhere. But now that he's found some success at outside corner, let's ride that. Let's see how far that can go and not moving back to safety here.
Yeah, I think it's also because, like, I think they kind of did that with him when he first got here. They kind of moved him around a bunch too between the 2 seasons that he was here. 2 seasons, yeah, he's in his 3rd year. And that was like one of the things where I remember asking him about that. What are you more comfortable on? He said he was a little bit more comfortable at safety, but maybe he's grown. Maybe he's changed his mind since then. Because obviously, as we said, he's having a lot of. You can tell the difference. I mean, in where he's all over the field, and now at outside corner. So, yeah.
I hope he's one of these outside corners who knows not to stick his head in the pile unless it's really necessary. And obviously, he made a great 4th and 1 tackle in this game. Not saying lighten up on that, but the 2000 Ravens in particular had Starks and McAllister at corner, and they kept them healthy the whole season because they were basically on orders. Don't get anywhere near the pile. And they knew they didn't have a lot of depth there, and they really got value out of those 2 guys because they were like smart. This on run plays. Yeah,
they played smart. That's what they did.
All right. What do you need to talk about? Anything else here? We talked a little bit about simulated pressures earlier, so I'm not going to go into that. They did have some stunts in this game. They were effective. There was a lot of overlap between deceptive elements in this game, which led to pass rush events. What I'm going to tell you is go to my article if you kind of want some further definition on this, because it's easier to see it sometimes in written form than it is for me to go through it and rattle it off and talk about this. Well, Melissa, I want to talk a little bit. First of all, thank you for coming on for this first part of the show. We're going to have you back for part 2 to talk about the individual personnel, but tell us a little bit about your show and what you're trying to do on 105.7.
Sure. So I have Game Day Lockdown on Friday nights. Again, kind of a misnomer, as we said, because it's not game day, but it's like a preview into game day, if you will. Honestly, I want to try because here's the thing, is you can talk about numbers and all that stuff, but for me, I've always been like a big person about intangibles, right? In terms of what you can't put a price on, what you can't put money on. I've kind of made a career out of that in a way, is telling stories of intangible athletes in the various places that I've worked before. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do, like really talk to a lot. I'm in my 3rd year covering this team, so I've built a lot of really wonderful relationships with a lot of lovely guys on the team, and just to have them talk to me about the various things that they're going through, and ahead of every game, but also just what's happening in their lives a little bit too. And I always have a national person come on to talk about the national perspective. Usually I try to get the person that's calling the game, and also as well as the opponent, a person covering the opposing team of the week too. So you get a lot of different perspective. I think that that's one of the most important things about covering this sport and doing this job, is perspective, right? Because I think that's kind of like why I'm here in a way too, because before I cover the Ravens, this is my 3rd NFL team, and I've covered some college too. So offering that perspective, I think, is
what
really
NFL
important.
teams before?
So I've covered the Packers and also the Patriots.
Okay.
And I spent some time covering the SEC and Big Ten as well. So yeah, there's a lot of like really lovely, wonderful stories out there, and obviously a big part of this job is relationships too. So there's a lot of really wonderful relationships on this team. Obviously, the first one that comes to mind is Roquan and PQ, and there's obviously Lamar and Tyler Huntley. And the one underrated one that I've loved too is Michael Pierce and Brent Urban. They're such an unlikely pair in a way. Yeah, they really are. I remember asking Anthony Weaver, the D-line coach, about them, and he's like, if you put them next to each other, they create a perfect number 10. And I was like, that's hilarious, but also so mean. But yeah,
it's very mean.
But Brent, I talked to them both about each other, which is kind of neat too, to hear them talk about each other. And Brent was like, I mean, I'm like a Canadian guy, like a big, tall Canadian guy. Like, Michael's from like Alabama, and yet we like came together on this team, both as veterans in our, multiple stints with this team. And we kind of came together and formed this relationship. And they really are like 2 peas in a pod, which is like an interesting visual, obviously, but in terms of how much respect they have for each other, and in terms of the things that they're going through in life, and just how they play together. And I think that is such an important part of football that is an intangible, right? It's building chemistry and building relationships. And it's been really cool to see in my, short 3 years here, those relationships build and grow, and just to see guys like kind of develop as well, because I know we were talking earlier about communication, in terms of Roquan Smith obviously being an anchor for the guy that talks a lot. I mean, the guy like literally talks so much. I mean, he also has a crazy, crazy memory. There are things that I've told him, because, naturally he talks a lot. So when we first met last year, he like asked me a bunch of questions about myself, and that was like what, like last October, last November, and he remembers everything that I've ever told him about myself because he'll bring it up to me like now and stuff like that. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't even believe you remember that. But his trickle down effect on this defense, especially this middle linebacker group. I mean, we're seeing guys who are admittedly shyer, like, quieter guys like Malik Harrison, like Patrick Queen, seeing them come out of their shells a little bit more this year, and obviously Patrick being the bigger one, in terms of taking that leadership role. Like, this past Wednesday after the Bengals game, he was the one that after practice, like, told the guys, like, look, like, we got to still, like, give 110%, pretend that we're, winless team so far. And that kind of leadership role obviously is an intangible. And then you hear about Malik Harrison, a guy that I talked to since I first got here, and he was always really shy. And then now he's like making jokes at me and being chatty and stuff. So it's been really cool.
That's great that you have that kind of access and certainly can build that kind of relationship. And obviously that sounds like a good enough reason alone to listen to Melissa's show on Friday night or post games on Sunday. So please do that. Other folks out there, if you'd like to be on a film study short, hit me up with a DM on Twitter. You know the rules by now. I'll get back to you very quickly. DMs are always open. Love to hear from you. That's how I meet the new people that drive this guest-driven show, and I really appreciate all the contributions over the years. Melissa, thanks again for joining me.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
And we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.